Right. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending where you are at joining us today. We'll get started here as people join in. So welcome to Wetlands, Hope in a Time of Uncertainty, a Wetlands Workforce Project showcase webinar. My name is Cindy Liu, and I'll be the host for this webinar. Please note that we are recording this webinar and we'll make it available on our website as well as share with all registrants. Before we begin, I would like to invite Dianna Smith, member of the Shuswap Band and a Ktunaxa Nation citizen, and our First Nation liaison to open.
Thank you, Cindy. Welcome to everyone. I am coming to you from the unceded territory of the Ktunaxa and Secwepemc Nation. We thank the Creator today for giving us this beautiful earth. We call on you today to protect our water, our animals, our air, and our Mother Earth that sustains us all. Creator, we thank you for your wisdom, your knowledge, and ask for you to guide us all in a good way. We ask for you to watch over all who is with us today and their families. And Creator, today we ask for you to provide healing and comfort to the sacred lives of our children of the residential schools. And Creator, we please ask to give strength and safety to those in turmoil on this earth today. All my relations.
Thank you so much, Dianna. As you will hear more later in the webinar, the Wetlands Workforce team works from all corners of British Columbia and beyond. So on behalf of the team, we acknowledge that the project carries out its work on the territories of 204 First Nations communities across BC and home to the Métis and Inuit people. We recognize the cultural importance of water as well as the importance of maintaining language unique to each communities. The image here encompasses the word water in several languages of Indigenous people in British Columbia. You can learn more about territories and language at the Native Land website, which I will drop it in the chat box right now. While I do that, I will now launch a poll. I see we have a lot of attendees joining us today. I will launch a poll and see how many of you have already know about the Wetlands Workforce or work with us. That will really help myself and our team to get to know a little bit about you. Thank you so much. Looks like majority has some knowledge about wetlands workforce already, so that's really great here. Share. If this is the first time you hear about the Wetlands Workforce Project, so it is a collaboration with conservation organizations and First Nations that deploy work plots across BC through 2021. With a vision to protect, restore, and promote BC's wetlands and watersheds for the benefit of present and future generations. The project is one of the over 60 projects supported through the Healthy Watersheds Initiative, which is delivered by the Real Estate Foundation of BC and Watersheds BC, with financial support from the province of British Columbia. At this webinar, you will hear from various members from the Wetlands Workforce Project team as we share accomplishments, findings, and learnings through the project. You will see two options to communicate on Zoom. So for questions that are directed to our project team, please type your questions using the Q&A function that you can find in the bottom or top of your screen, depending on your interface setting. And please use the chat box for any general comments. For the chat box, you will have the option to send messages to either everyone or to just the host, myself, and the panelists. So there are some options there for you. We will also use a chat box to provide links to some of our resources that we will mention in the slides coming up. Our team will monitor the questions throughout the webinar, but we'll leave most of the time and space at the very end of the presentation to answer or discuss further. Now I would like to invite my team to say a quick hello and introduce themselves. I can go first. So my name is Cindy Liu. I started as a Canadian Conservation Corps intern at the BC Wildlife Federation and now working as the Wetlands Workforce Coordinator. I join you today on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina Nation, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, and the Métis Nation, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. And Neil, would you like to go next?
Thank you, Cindy. Hi, everyone. My name is Neil Fletcher. I'm the Director of Conservation Stewardship with BC Wildlife Federation. I gratefully live and work on the land of the Kakite First Nation on the shores of the Fraser River and a gathering place and shared territory of many of the Coast Salish peoples. I'll pass it over to Megan.
Thanks, Neil. Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Saunders, and I'm joining you from the Lekwungen-speaking Peoples Territory in Victoria, known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt Nations. And I am a project manager for the Wetlands Workforce. I will pass it off to Alex.
Thanks, Megan. Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Brown. I'm the Assistant Project Manager for the Wetlands Workforce, and today I'm coming to you from the traditional, unceded, and ancestral territories of the Coast Salish peoples, so the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Musqueam Nations. And I will pass it to Kyla.
Thanks, Alex. I'm Kyla Rushton. I'm the Wetland Assessment and Field Coordinator for the Wetlands Workforce, and I'm joining you today from the traditional and unceded territory of the Ktunaxa. I'll pass it to Dianna.
Hi there, Dianna Cody. I'm the Aboriginal liaison for the Wetlands Workforce, and I'm coming to you from the Ktunaxa and Secwepemc Nations, unceded territory. I have been working with the Wetlands Workforce since October and came on to assist Megan in engagement with the Indigenous communities across British Columbia. I hope you enjoy today's presentation. Thanks. I'll pass it to Shinoa.
Hi, my name is Shinoa Gao. I acknowledge that I'm living and working on the unceded territory of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. I am a member of the Muskeg Lake Cree Nation in Saskatchewan. I am a conservation illustrator for Wetlands Workforce. I will now pass it on to Cheyenne.
Just in time, I think Cheyenne just got out of a meeting, so good to see you, Cheyenne. Would you like to say a little quick hello?
Yes, hello and welcome everyone. My name is Cheyenne. I'm joining you today from the traditional and unceded territories of the Syilx Okanagan people in Vernon. I was the communications coordinator with the Wetlands Workforce and have now shifted over to the communications manager position with the Healthy Watersheds Initiative.
And thank you, everyone. Neil, I will now pass it to you.
Great, thanks. So first of all, I just wanted to talk a bit about wetlands and why are we gathered here today. In the last few centuries, new settlers cleared and filled land to grow crops and build towns. And unfortunately, wetlands had been treated as wastelands throughout this process. We've lost a large portion of them, especially in developed areas. However, they are special ecosystems where water is located near the surface and alters the soils and the plants to create a unique and valuable environment. They're home to fish, wildlife, and species at risk. They can have among the highest capacity of any other ecosystem to store carbon in their soils. They can filter pollutants, protecting downstream environments. They help buffer extreme weather patterns. They can serve as fire breaks. They can attenuate floodwaters and slowly release and steadily supply streams in dry periods. I'd like to talk a bit about how the Wetlands Workforce Project was initiated. The BC Wildlife Federation, which I've worked for the last 12 years, has collaborated with many organizations and communities over the last 25 years, running a wetlands education program to enhance stewardship capacity. Despite our knowledge of the importance of wetland conservation, it has been largely underfunded. In early 2020, we joined a coalition to advocate for a sustainable watershed fund and a watershed security strategy, with the goal of providing British Columbians with healthier watersheds where we could collectively become more resilient to climate change threats and also support reconciliation. On March 11th, 2020, as many of you might know, there was a global pandemic announced and our world changed. People were losing their jobs, and these impacts were mostly affecting women, people under 30, and First Nations. The coalition put out a call for project ideas to support economic recovery. And the BC Wildlife Federation proposed a wetlands workforce that could put people back to work in a safe outdoor environment, could offer childcare to workers in the field, could support much needed maintenance and monitoring around BC on a lot of our wetlands. And our goal was to support a minimal of 100 people and to make an impact in wetland conservation. The province supported this project through an economic stimulus package announced in September 2020. When we received our funding, it was in December of 2020, and we hit the ground running. At the beginning of the project, there was less than a handful of us launching this project. That included Cindy, who you've met, who had recently lost her job in the hotel service industry. We reached out to similar organizations to help oversee work pods in the field. We began to assemble further project details from them. We prepared service agreements to help implement the project. And we also began hiring for leadership positions, including a First Nation liaison for our headquarters team. By spring, we set to work on preparing virtual training. We were running a series of virtual engagements with Indigenous communities to discuss proposed works and seek interest. We finalized some of our field crew hires and we began to deploy them in the field. By summer, we were completing the majority of our field work. We were conducting research and monitoring projects, and we continued to engage and involve Indigenous partners in the field. By the fall and winter, we were finalizing our field work and restoration activities. We were transitioning our field crews to office-based roles, and then began the long process of data synthesis, reporting, and debriefing with partners, including First Nations. In terms of socio-economic outcomes, the benefits of this project were broadly spread across several regions of BC, with the majority of the activities occurring in the South Coast, followed by the Kootenay region, Thompson Okanagan, Northeast, and the West Coast. Originally, we proposed 100 jobs, but provided economic benefit to over 205 people. Reflecting on the target demographics of those 205, we estimated that 41% were Indigenous, 34% were under 30, and 65% were women. I'm going to pass it over to my esteemed colleague, Alex Brown.
Thanks so much, Neil. So in this next section, we'd like to highlight some of our supporters throughout this project. So with the implementation of this large-scale project, couldn't have been done without the support of many hardworking First Nations partners and collaborators. So we relied on many existing relationships, but also created lots of new connections along the way to meet our common goals and see this project to fruition. So they took shape in many different ways, as you can see in this photo. So it's a lot of in-field collaboration, but also lots of virtual collaboration. So as Neil mentioned, at the beginning of the project, so December 2020, and then the first few months of 2021, service agreements were created with 7 partnering groups. So half of the fund was allocated to these conservation groups and First Nation band who created work pods in various regions across BC to support shovel-ready projects. So the work pods consisted of field crews, of supervisors and field technicians deployed at various sites around the province to complete maintenance, monitoring, and research on wetlands. I'll talk about a bit more of them in detail here. So we had the Yakanuki or the Lower Kootenay Band. So the Yakanuki Wetland Restoration Project has been a large-scale project occurring over the past few years to restore natural floodplain habitat. There was one work pod here assisting with ongoing maintenance and monitoring of the restoration project. So it was many plantings of live stakes, planting and seeding of many native plants, and they also got to learn some wetland restoration techniques with Tom Beebekauser, who's a wetland restoration specialist that you can see in the top right. So they got to learn some hands-on field skills while the restoration continued. Wild Coast Ecological Society operated one work pod in the Vancouver area and on the North Shore of Vancouver. So they operated in lots of provincial and city properties to complete maintenance and restoration projects. So they completed work on many highly urbanized sites, which are often overlooked, but also extremely valuable for habitat for waterfowl, songbirds, bats, and numerous other species. One of the highlights for Wild Coast was working at Trout Lake in Vancouver, which was a partnership with the Tsleil-Waututh and the Vancouver City Parks Board. So after a restoration project, they helped lead educational nature walks, specifically to observe bats in the evenings around the lake and work with residents and children. Nature Trust of BC operated 4 work pods, one in the Lower Mainland, based in Vancouver, one on Vancouver Island, based near Nanaimo, one in the Thompson Okanagan region, based near Kelowna and Penticton, and one in the Kootenays, located near Kimberley. So they completed maintenance and monitoring, as well as research on many nature trust properties around the province. One of the highlights for the Kootenay pod was creating a new partnership with the Slocan River Stream Keepers and the Ministry of Forests, Lands and Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development. So they worked on 9 sites through the Walter Clough Wildlife Area, planting trees and shrubs and installing songbird nesting boxes. Nature Conservancy of Canada operated 2 work pods, one on Vancouver Island, based in Victoria, and one in the Okanagan region. So they worked on maintenance, monitoring, and assessments of many NCC operated conservation lands. One of the highlights for that Southern Interior pod was working at the Lac du Bois site, where they designed and implemented a native plant restoration project. In doing so, they planted on upland areas with native species, installed signage and fencing, browse guards, and cleaned debris. The Langley Environmental Partner Society, so they had 1 pod located in the Lower Mainland. So they focused in Langley, in and around Langley, and worked to visit 32 past project sites for maintenance and monitoring of wetlands. So they covered in total 199,000 square meters, where they removed invasive plants and pests, as well as weeds from their sites. We had the Fraser Valley Watershed Coalition, which operated 1 pod in the Lower Mainland, and they helped complete maintenance on past restoration sites, where they helped identify needs and potential deficiencies to improve future access. So these are many sites located around the Abbotsford, Chilliwack area, and many sites along the Fraser River. They also hired a watersheds educator to help spread awareness and organize outreach with schools. Ducks Unlimited Canada operated 3 work pods. 1 work pod was in the Peace region of BC, completing maintenance and monitoring, as well as including maintenance on 33 dam control and water control structures on Ducks Unlimited properties. And then 2 work pods were working in the Lower Mainland, and they helped support marsh recession and Fraser estuary teams. So lots of inland wetlands, but also worked on lots of tidally influenced wetlands. And then we also had their BCWF, which operated 5 core work pods. So 1 work pod was the Southwest crew, who operated from the Okanagan all the way to the Gulf Islands on privately owned and restored wetland sites. 2 different Kootenay pods, 1 completing wetland maintenance and monitoring, and then another doing a study and collecting samples of macroinvertebrates in wetlands. We had a Northeast pod located around Dawson Creek and Fort St. John, and they were completing WESP, Wetlands Ecosystem Service Protocol, all year with the Northern Lights College students. And then we had a Fraser River estuary debris cleanup crew that you can see on the boat in the top right. Yeah, so I talked a bit about the extent of the work pods. So here you can see the map of really how far that reach extends. So it's quite a lot of wetlands that were visited throughout the year. In total, there was 473 wetland sites. If you look at the map, there's the red dots, or sorry, the blue dots are the restoration and maintenance and monitoring sites. There's 252 of those. And then the red dots on the map are the data points, wetlands throughout the province that were collected for the Wetlands Ecosystem Service Protocol calibration. And this was completed by all partner pods and all the work pods in the field, and we'll talk about that in the further slides. So yeah, we talked about some of the core partnerships, but there were many others along the way that helped see this project to fruition. So this is by no means an exhaustive list, and we want to thank everyone that assisted in this project. But to highlight on a few of them, we talked about there's some education institutes, so from universities to educational outreach programs, from working with master's students at the university level to all the way to elementary school kids. Many of the work pods worked holding educational days with elementary school kids. I think the photo in the middle, you can see the Fraser Valley Watershed Coalition working with an elementary group. Government, we relied on many government bodies and municipalities and districts to help with providing permissions for site access during our Wetlands Ecosystem Service Protocol calibration. Other NGOs, we did work a lot with the Canadian Conservation Corps, which was administered through the Canadian Wildlife Federation. So many of our BCF pods had CCC interns throughout the year. First Nations, we tried to reach out early in the project and relied on many existing relationships, but also built many new ones along the way. We'll touch more on this in more detail in the next slides. So landowners, we work with many passionate landowners. A lot of these sites are on privately owned lands where we were completing maintenance and monitoring, and these passionate landowners are very helpful in providing access and support to our work pods. And then finally, we touch on local and subject matter experts. So we worked with many subject matter experts to help as trainers for our workforce. So one of the initiatives of the Wetlands Workforce was to build training and skills for employees and to expand on wetland knowledge. So building value long-term really starts with building value and empowering individuals. So one of the initiatives was an online resource platform that was created for the Wetlands Workforce participants. They can log in to watch pre-recorded videos, but also the BCWF hosted many live panel discussions with experts on topics such as bird and amphibian monitoring, wetland ID, wetland ecosystem service protocol, live staking techniques, species and plant ID, wetland hydrology, as well as decolonization and cultural awareness training. So I will pass it off to Megan Saunders to talk about wetland workforce and reconciliation.
Great, thank you, Alex. So as Cindy mentioned, the Healthy Watersheds Initiative, who we received this grant funding from, recognized and emphasized the importance of relationships with Indigenous people. And 1/3 of all the projects funded by this initiative were First Nations led. So the BCWF, as a non-Indigenous led nonprofit, was provided funding to support collaboration with Indigenous communities. And as a nonprofit, it was a relatively unique opportunity to have this additional capacity to work collaboratively to advance wetland conservation. And it was also unique in that we were a part of a broader community of over 60 project teams under the framework of the Healthy Watersheds Initiative that were seeking to advance UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, through watershed stewardship. So to guide our engagement efforts with Indigenous communities, as Neil mentioned, one of the first hires on the project on the Wetlands Workforce was Glenn Auger as First Nations liaison. So Glenn was a member of Tall Cree First Nation of Treaty 8 with many years experience working as a liaison. And tragically, we lost Glenn to a very rapid form of cancer in December of last year. So we've all been incredibly fortunate for the time we have had with Glenn and have been honored to receive and carry forward his teachings and lessons from his culture. And Glenn was extremely passionate about this project, and he saw this project as an opportunity to set an example for how a team like us of majority non-Indigenous practitioners of Western science could work with communities to advance reconciliation. So we've included a quote on this slide from Farron Hambler, who I'm hoping is here today. I believe he's in the audience. Farron is an elder and knowledge keeper from Kelly Lake Cree Nation, and Farron spoke to this similar sentiment where he said, I follow traditional knowledge while others follow Western science. Somewhere in between, these two are going to get together and they're going to evolve into something that is going to make this a better place to live. That is our goal on both sides. So we share this spirit with Farron and continue to seek to understand how we can all come together to make this a better place to live. So under Glenn's direction, we endeavored to build relationships with communities based on respect and recognition of rights. So in order to best prepare our newly formed team to work respectfully, Glenn, along with an Indigenous consultant, Solomon Reese, developed custom decolonization and cultural awareness training, which we made mandatory for all staff at the start of their employment. So the decolonization training provided new hires with awareness of the history and legacy of colonization. And the cultural awareness training provided our team with greater understanding of the community connection to wetlands and overall discussions about what engagement could look like while we are out on these lands. So, and as part of recognizing rights, while we were busy hiring staff and getting ready for the field season, we prepared an information package regarding our proposed activities as part of this project. We identified the Indigenous communities to contact based on the province of BC's consultative area database. So based on that query, we notified over 120 First Nations about the project, and those were the communities that had traditional territories overlapping with these proposed activities. So we sent out this information package to those communities. And within that information package, we did acknowledge that Indigenous rights include the jurisdiction and stewardship over water and wetland habitats. And we sought input and opportunities for collaboration as directed by the community and sought input for how we could work together on this project. So we, following the mailing and emailing of that package, we subsequently hosted 5 virtual engagement sessions where we had participation from representatives of around 30 Indigenous communities from throughout the province. And in these sessions, we shared our openness and willingness to follow the lead of the communities for how we could work together. And I should note that our further engagement only occurred where we heard back from communities. So recognizing that more could have been done to connect. And we did rely on the contacts from the consultative area database. So that may have also been limited for who we could connect with. It's also important to note how devastating this year was for Indigenous communities. So in addition to the COVID-19 pandemic, it was a monumental year for wildfires and floods, which we know disproportionately impacted Indigenous communities in the province. Another major impact to these communities were the announcements regarding the residential school recoveries. And while we know this did not come as a surprise, the news still continues to serve as painful reminders to the loss and horror of the residential school system. In spite of these tragic events, we were able to hear from and work with many communities throughout the province, which we were very grateful for. So Dianna, who will be speaking shortly, will talk more about what opportunities were created throughout the year. One of these opportunities, which was based on the interest expressed by community members, was that we were able to record interviews with elders sharing their stories and connections to water and wetlands. And these interviews provided the content and inspiration for Shinoa's portfolio of illustrations created for the project. So some background on how we created these illustrations. In the fall of 2021, we put out job postings for conservation illustrators. And this was based on feedback from communities that suggested we could use more visual references in our data collection procedures. We also wanted to create more visual educational content that could engage broader audiences to raise awareness about wetlands, in particular youth. A common theme from working with communities was the importance of involving youth in knowledge sharing. And some of these conversations occurred when we were working with the Lower Nicola Indian Band community, who are actually pictured on this slide. So this photo is from a shared day of learning with, I think it was 16 elders and youth from the Lower Nicola Indian Band at a project site in Logan Lake. And I think we may have Rena and potentially Steve on the call today, so hopefully you're here. But when we were interested in exchanging knowledge with the elders from the Lower Nicola Indian Band. And what we heard is that if we are creating the shared learning opportunity with our team, we should also be involving youth from their community. So based on what we've heard, I'm hoping Shanoa can now speak to how those conversations have translated into the series of comic illustrations.
Thank you, Megan. Yeah, so a colleague and friend of mine passed along this really cool opportunity for conservation illustrator position. It was First Nations based, and I thought this is really cool. I should check this out. And I interviewed for this position, and I am just so absolutely thankful that I did. Because this has been an amazing experience. It's been totally transformative. I've learned so much about myself, First Nations culture, and it's been truly just, I'm so proud of this project. So basically my main goal was to honor elders and share their amazing stories. And it's really neat because, you know, the quotes that I'd be given, it's just a small paragraph. And as I'm reading this paragraph, I'm visualizing, you know, what are the elders thinking about? What are the elders trying to show us? What are the elders trying to teach us? So I take up this paragraph and I split up the sentences and I create a rough sketch, which is called a storyboard. And I think about what it would give the best visual impact. What's the best way to design each panel? Where would the text be laid out? And then from there, I think about the actual sentence itself. What are they saying? And what kind of visualizations does that bring me? And then I put those into the panels. From there, this first comic that you see was the very first quote that I did by Rena Jo. And I really liked it because she had, you know, such great words, and it just brought some really wonderful imagery, you know, and she's talking about how she's seeing things that are happening to the water. You know, there's things that concern her, and she starts thinking, you know, this is kind of crazy because I shouldn't have to go buy water from the store. You know, I should just be able to go to the mountains. I should just be able to take the water from the mountain and give my thanks for the water that I have. And I should just be able to have access to this beautiful water, to this beautiful land. But instead, I just can't go out because it's polluted. I thought Rena had an absolutely, you know, beautiful message there. And, you know, her main focus is teaching the youth to appreciate the land, to understand that the land and the water will always be there for you. No matter what's going on in your life, it will always be there for you, and it will surround you with love. And that's really important because that teaches, you know, the future generations to appreciate the land and take care of the land. The next comic I did was June Johnson. I had so much fun with June's. It was absolutely great because it just, it made me think of, you know, those Netflix shows called The Final Table. And there was this one that was really neat because it showed not Venezuelan, where is it from? I can't remember the country. It was in South America, Patagonia. And the chef was talking about a very similar feast, just like this, very traditional Patagonian feast. They would go out They would capture the fresh meat. They would forage for all sorts of, morsels and fresh root vegetables and things. And then they would have this really nice cookout and feast, and it would take the whole day, and they'd bake bread. And so the June Johnson story really reminded me of this. And I thought, I really need to display it, just like these beautiful chef tables. And it was a really cool story because it shows a lot of Indigenous knowledge of plants. It talks about how, there's this amazing buffet just waiting for us out in nature, and it talks about how it brought the whole community together because everyone would get out and they'd gather the ferns, they would grab, the skunk cabbage. They would have people going out to collect the seafood. They would have people preparing the fire. And it was just this beautiful whole day event. And some of it was quite ingenious, using kelp bulbs underneath the pit to provide steam while cooking. And I also learned in doing my research for this that the clam gardens that the First Nations people cultivated are older than the pyramids, which I thought was really cool. And then at the end of the day, everyone would just sit around the fire, they would tell stories, and they would just enjoy each other's company. And it just seemed like such a fabulous day, great way for the community to get together, reflect, share stories. It was really neat. The next one is by Farron Hambler. I really love doing this comic. It was just so colorful. And again, what Farron points to is the dichotomy of Western life and traditional life. And this is what this comic is also about, how, his father was very much about teaching him about the traditional ways of life, living off the land, respect for the land. And his mother was very much about the Western way of life. You have to go to school, you have to go to church. But I really love Farron's message, it's you don't take more than what you need. You appreciate the land. You show the land respect. You show the land the love that you have for the land. And then when you do that, the land will give back to you and you will receive. And I really love that message. The next one is by Marion. This was, she had a really fabulous message as well. It was really great. She, again, like the other elders, really want to show the youth how beautiful the land is, why they should love the land, and that they're the future land guardians. They're the future water guardians, showing how the land is so alive. Even though you look at it, you don't see what's going on, but there's so many things going on in the background. She talks about the importance of water and how water is you. It's always a part of you. So if you have any problems, you take it to the water and the water will listen to you. Water is life. Water is a mother, so I wanted to portray, water as a mother feeding the land. And of course, with all things, First Nations really want to show their respect for water. Water is life. Water is everything to them. And so they're in the panel, it's the elders giving back to the water, showing their love for the water. And I think the message she had, which was the most important to me, was how can you really know who you are if you don't have a relationship with water? If you don't understand water, if you don't respect the water, if you don't spend time with water and in nature, you really don't know much about yourself. And I think that's a really important message for youth, especially for youth who are feeling lost, youth who are feeling disconnected, youth who are, still suffering from the effects of colonization. I think that getting them engaged in the wetlands, getting them engaged in water, getting them engaged in protecting water and becoming water guardians, I think will really help them to connect back to themselves. And the last one I did was Johnny Jackson. And I really loved this one. This one was great because he's talking about, yes, water is important, but, women are also really important too, because they are the guardians of the water. They are the protectors of the water. I think that when you understand how important water is this female association for First Nations people, and how colonization has really pushed women down. And with a lot of the murdered and missing women, you really kind of understand how a lot of these water rights and land rights are so important, because it's such a central theme to First Nations people. And he wants to show, woman, you have no idea how strong you are. You have no idea how powerful you are, because the water flows through you. You are life, you are water. And he talks about how, women are the future water guardians. Women need to pass this knowledge down to their children. They need to bring their children up. And so, I thought this is really great. And another important feature is he talks about his traditional name. A lot of First Nations people couldn't use their name. They were given white names. And it's amazing that, he's proud of his name, and his name is tied to the water. His name is tied to the sturgeon. And he's so proud to say his name. And I think, all First Nations should be proud to say their name. And I think it's beautiful that in his nation and his language, all women, their traditional name has ko in it, which relates to water. So all women, again, are brought back to water, being the water guardians. So really, when you look at how a lot of First Nations people don't have access to clean water, they don't have access to their land, they don't have access to their wetlands, you realize how this is huge. This is, this is something that is, we really need to focus on bringing the water back to First Nations people, giving them back their water rights, letting them have access to clean water, letting them have access to their land, to their traditional territories, and working together. Because I don't think that until, as First Nations people, we have access to our land, and we have access to our language, and we have access to our water, do we really have reconciliation? And so this is why I'm so proud to work with Wetlands Workforce, and given this opportunity to create these comics and to highlight elder knowledge, because to me, I feel this is what reconciliation looks like. This is what moving forward looks like. And I really hope that it inspires youth like it inspired me. And I really hope that, we can together, as a province go, hey, we need to do better. We need to work better. And so I really hope that my comics, can inspire the youth and help with reconciliation. So thank you. That's it for me today. And I pass it on to Cheyenne.
All right. It goes on to Dianna next.
Thank you, Cheyenne. That was very, very powerful. I know that I have a section on what water means to the Indigenous, but I think you said it very beautifully and very powerfully. Thank you very much. Collaboration, field practicum youth and guardian engagement with the Northern Pods, students from the Northern Light College. And this was through Glenn's contacts and passion of education and youth. We developed a partnership with Northern Lights College, and we were able to offer practicum placements as part of their Land and Water Resource Diploma program. We were able to provide paid employment opportunities to the Indigenous students, and we worked with our Northern crew and trained on the Wetlands Ecosystem Protocol. It was an important collaboration, sharing traditional knowledge in Western science, and the students benefited greatly from that and will continue to take that to their communities and share the knowledge that they learned during that engagement and training. We also had Yakanuki, which I know that Alex had spoke on a little bit. We had Norm Allard leading that project, and he if anything, gave us tons of laughs and just such joy in working with Norm down in Creston. It was a partner with the Wetlands Workforce, and as Alex had said, there was some live staking. We did some monitoring. We addressed massive invasive species on the 517 hectares of wetlands that they're initiating and trying to restore. Installed wildlife cameras and have a 4-year wildlife monitoring program going on. We hope to continue to engage and support Yakanuki because they're doing amazing work, and we love Norm's jokes. So planning and prescriptions at Tobacco Plains Band, this was quite an exciting one because I came on initially as we started this project. Sorry, I'm just reading something about Norm and his hilarious. So with Tobacco Plains, like I said, this was an exciting one because I was hired after October, and so I was able to initiate the project and work alongside. And we had initially started out with an elders tour and getting them out onto a project that was near Tobacco Plains called Earl Ranch. Through the elders tour, it was discussed that there was a need for somebody to engage with Tobacco Plains, and Tom was available, Biemenhauser, and he was able to go out with Tobacco Plains elders and take a look at some of the wetlands that had dried up and you know, to discuss where the sources of water was going. So as a result of that, Tobacco Plains with Tom were able to design and develop different prescriptions for 3 different areas of wetlands that were in need of protection and need of restoration. And we're still working with Tobacco Plains. We're going to go out again with the elders and discuss which one of those 3 projects would likely be incredibly beneficial to start a restoration plan on. So that's a continuation. What did we learn? I'm not going to talk about the water because Shanoa so eloquently talked about water with our communities and what it means to our communities and how water is life. And in our Indigenous communities, we certainly do know that the source, material, cultural, spirituality to our water is so powerful and so important. Time and resource. We didn't have a lot of time. As you know, the project was a 1-year project. We tried our best to get out there and engage with our Indigenous communities. We tried to get the message out there and make really good, positive connections. And each community is unique in culture. So there was the time to learn about our communities, the time to engage, the time to connect in a really, really meaningful way. It ended up being non-prescriptive because each community is different, each culture is different, and we needed to learn that. And luckily, you know, through the cultural workshops that we did with Glenn, we learned so much in how to connect with our Indigenous communities. And each community has different environmental circumstances. So it was a continuous learning curve for us. Every time we connected with the community, it was different. It was always powerful. And through that as well, there was lots of challenges and flexibility that we had to address. Flexibility was, I think that it was probably one of the easiest because we had such a great crew and young and vibrant and you know, the training and the knowledge and capacity that we provided to our communities and in a flexible way was incredibly powerful. We had challenges, that's for sure, in learning how to address, of course, what we had to deal with the COVID, the discoveries, the fires, the flooding, road closures. And so in times where we were prepared to jump out the door and run out to support our communities, we had to be flexible in saying, oh, we can't access that community, we need to reschedule. And so it was, that was definitely an ongoing challenge that we had. We tried to connect with the communities through CAD, but we realized that there was challenges in capacity within our communities. Sometimes the letters that we had sent out would sit on somebody's desk. So it was a need that we had to address, in the sense that perhaps we could have provided an Indigenous liaison for each of the regions, and to make it one-on-one in some instances, where that person could literally go to the door to knock on it and say hello, and here we are, and this is what we're doing. It was challenging, not only just through COVID, not only just through the challenges of Mother Nature, but also the challenges of location and distances that we had to address with connecting with our communities. So we certainly had to be flexible. I can say that through COVID and through the Zoom meetings, and it allowed for a lot more of our elders to be connected with. We were able to connect with many, many more people through that. But a lot of our elders were challenged in computer access, and so that, in being flexible to be able to, address those needs of our community, the connection through technology was challenging. But it seemed like the elders always found an auntie, or the elders always found a cousin or a daughter or son to be able to go and jump on a computer. So it was pretty powerful in the fact that we were able to connect with a whole lot more people in that manner. So I just wanted to say that the Wetlands Workforce has done amazing work, and through being Indigenous myself and knowing the power of what we've done here has been incredible. And talking to my communities and talking to my Indigenous relations, it has been an incredible, powerful project for our communities, not just through the education that we provided or the employment that we provided, but through partnership and through the love of the land, and knowing that we need to be here to protect it. And so, moving forward, I'm hoping that our Indigenous communities can continue to do that work. And I'm hoping that somehow through BCWF, WW, Wetlands Workforce, that we can support them in some manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Dianna. So I'm going to talk about a bit more on the environmental outcomes, and just wanted to acknowledge my team that's talked so far. I'm just really so proud of all the hard work and their great presentations that have taken us here. So we did talk a bit earlier about the socio-economic benefits, the partnerships that were established, our approach to Indigenous engagement. I did want to sort of pull out more on the environmental impacts of the project, and we can go to the next slide, Cindy. Yeah, so when we first conceptualized this project, we were aiming for a minimum of 25 sites that would receive benefits. In the end, we had on-the-ground work that occurred over 252 sites. With this, cumulatively, this resulted in the installation of native plants on 57.5 hectares, removing of invasive species on over 100 hectares, and the removing of garbage and debris on 108 sites. And just for context, a hectare is 10,000 square meters. You can go to the next slide. these are just a few examples of some of the on-the-ground work. Obviously, I can't cover 252 sites and what happened on each of those, but we just pulled out a few samples. So on the top left here, we see some of the work of Wild Coast Ecological Society, who collaborated in this image with BC Parks and Tsleil-Waututh First Nation and Mount Seymour Resort to restore a wetland on the shores of Flower Lake that was negatively impacted by erosion. The work pod gathered pre-restoration data, removed all the substrate that had eroded into the site, and restored the shoreline to prevent further erosion, improve water quality, and to support healthy habitat for amphibians and other wildlife. On the right, we see the Fraser River Estuary Cleanup Work Pod, who started in mid-September and wrapped up in December. Throughout their time, they removed over 9.5 tons of debris along 62.6 kilometers of the Fraser Estuary shorelines. Styrofoam ranging from a few centimeters to over 3 meters tall accounted for most of the numerous debris that they collected. Other common debris included plastic, tires, treated wood, and shotgun shells. Across all the wetland workforce work pods, debris and garbage were removed from 108 wetland sites, as I'd mentioned, and many involve public participation. Lastly, on the bottom left, you see our Southwest pod at Gardam Lake, who collaborated with Friends of Gardam Lake. Together, they installed 4 basking logs that were about 3 to 4 meters long. Other wildlife enhancement included installation of bird boxes, amphibian refugia, and these types of enhancements occurred at 24 wetland workforce sites. Aside from the physically demanding labor projects that our crews were involved in, we also introduced some science and adaptive management as part of our project so that we could enrich the experience and skills of the work pods and improve our stewardship actions into the future. Projects included habitat monitoring, research of the effectiveness of past wetland restoration sites, health assessments of wetlands to prioritize future action, and research on research to understand how to conserve wetlands in the face of climate change. So the next slide will just show some examples of some of those research and monitoring projects. So the first one I have on the left here is Nature Conservancy of Canada. Their Southern Interior pod and their West Coast pod completed an astonishing 233 riparian health assessments across their lands within the province. These assessments will help the Nature Conservancy of Canada understand the health of the wetlands on their properties, as well as to prioritize future projects. The next image is of Ducks Unlimited Canada and their marsh recession crew. They supported research and experiments on causes of tidal marsh recession in the Fraser Estuary, which will inform decision makers of ways to support estuary resilience with sea level rise. Activities include gloose exclosure design experiments with BCIT master's student, bulrush density and sediment accumulation monitoring, and vegetation composition ground truthing of high precision satellite imagery in collaboration with Simon Fraser University. The next image we see is with the Fraser Valley Watershed Coalition, where staff are sampling waterways to understand the presence and usage of aquatic habitats from salmon and culturally important fish. In this sample, chum salmon have been caught and are being enumerated before being safely released back into the watercourse. Lastly, we see another project that was mentioned just a bit earlier with Stephen Blair. He's a student with the BC Institute of Technology and Simon Fraser University. And here he's completing his master's study that focuses on the effectiveness of restored wetlands. Through the collection of macroinvertebrates, Stephen is aiming to determine the state of the ecosystem's health and recovery. And that's only a snapshot of some of the projects that these teams were involved in. And unfortunately, we just can't cover them all. I'll pass it over to Kyla.
Thanks, Neil. So as part of the Wetlands Workforce, we were also able to have all of the partner crews join us for 2 weeks for 2 different developments of some wetland tools. So generally the first week would be wetland training, and then the second week would be completing wetland assessments on their own. So this was to support the development of 2 wetland conservation tools that were in the surrounding region for where that crew was based. So the first of these was to support wetland predictive mapping. In BC, our wetlands are so diverse. These are just a few pictures of some of the wetlands we assessed. And in Canada, our available data sets are pretty generic and the accuracy is highly variable for where wetlands occur. So we would have a wetland data set, but it can be out of date as the changes in hydrology and the development can alter wetland occurrence. So while doing field work, we would drive out to a site that had 1 polygon or 1 wetland mapped. We'd actually find like a much differently sized area or several wetlands, or we would get exactly to a spot on a map where we expected to have a wetland, and we would be in like a dry hayfield or a Walmart parking lot, so not a wetland. We have little to no information on what classes of wetlands occur, so a marsh versus a treed swamp versus a peatland. And on the map, they're all like the same type of polygon. They look the same to us. So that last slide was just a diversity of how different wetlands can look on the ground, but in a satellite image, they're generally mapped as the same polygon. So we need better wetland mapping layers for a wide variety of uses, and our data sets need to be updated, such as with other provinces and countries have completed. So the Canadian Wildlife Service is developing machine learning, so training a computer to predict the class and locations of wetlands in Canada. And this process of training a model relies on high quality input data. So this is the data that we collected this year. Essentially, it's a GPS point that's verified for what kind of class is occurring at that location to tell the computer what type of wetlands are occurring where. So for example, we would take a point within a bog and that data would tell the model, this is what the pattern of a bog looks like. It can use that information to predict a similar pattern in another area, could be another occurrence of a bog, and so forth. We collected 371 points to confirm what the land cover is at different locations. We also had Ecologic Consulting develop the plant guide showed on the right that has a diversity of indicator species for different wetland classes to aid in this process. Next slide. The other protocol that we worked to collect data for is the Wetland Ecosystem Services Protocol that we also refer to as WESP. So what are ecosystem services? Neil mentioned some of these that wetlands provide at the beginning of the presentation. Often this term is thought of as kind of the functions with a potential value to society that a properly functioning wetland provides for free. So as highlighted in some of the pictures throughout this presentation, the wetlands are diverse, which makes comparing the different ecosystem goods and services between different wetlands really difficult. Different wetlands can be good at different things. One wetland might be really good for wildlife and amphibian habitat, but not have enough open water to be great for water birds. Whereas another wetland might be excellent at taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and sequestering it underground, but not have enough plant diversity to be excellent pollinator habitat. So the different functions that wetlands provide makes it difficult to compare these. But society is constantly faced with decisions surrounding wetlands, like which wetland is more important to protect or enhance, or we have to develop this area and we have to damage or remove a wetland, but how should this wetland be appropriately replaced during offsetting? These questions are hard to answer since the wetlands vary so much, but WESP is one tool that can be used to objectively help answer these questions by returning comparable metrics on the different wetland functionings under these different categories listed. So the model can tell you the rank of a wetland compared to the base data set of wetlands in a region. You could just click one more time, Cindy. So these are the regions that we've calibrated as part of the 2021 wetland workforce. The northeast is the Peace region, which we refer to as the Boreal and Taiga Plains. And then the southeast is the Southern Interior. The green line is the Georgia Depression. And then the blue region was calibrated as another initiative from 2019 to 2021 as part of the Environmental Sustainability Initiative. One important note is that the Indigenous, cultural, and traditional values of wetlands to the people that have managed wetlands historically is not truly encompassed in this tool. So this tool is not meant to replace the appropriate consultation with knowledge keepers and incorporation of local First Nation knowledge, but it's a tool that can be used alongside that for the evaluation of wetlands. Next slide. So WESP assesses approximately 60 field questions and 50 GIS questions. In order for this to be used in decision making, we require that a region to be calibrated. So we collect a bunch of different points within an eco province to get an idea of what the functioning levels of wetlands are within that region. So this is across a variety of forest types, of different disturbances. So this Georgia Depression is the Lower Mainland and part of Vancouver Island. The little dots are sites that we assessed. The green region is based on the biogeoclimatic zone or forest types that we consider to be almost adequately captured, and then the yellow region is our next priority. The green region is high priority and the yellow region is what we think we've almost adequately captured. In the Georgia Depression, we are calibrating WESP both with a tidal model, so wetlands that are influenced by the tides, and then a non-tidal model for the upland wetlands. We've got about 50% of each eco province complete for the calibration. We need about 100 wetlands total, and this Guinea region is the only one that's done. Then the other 3 listed here are about half done. The points on the left are predictive mapping points for what kind of wetland classes we've captured on these wetlands. So there could be multiple predictive mapping points within one wetland that was assessed for WESP. So the Georgia Depression, we got to a lot of the lower elevations and pretty good coverage in the Campbell River region. And then we have some more remote sites to finish calibration. Next slide, Cindy. In the southern interior mountains, there's a high diversity of biogeoclimatic zones. We focused this year on the south half of the eco province, with the work pods being based mostly in the south. So the south half is almost done, and then the north half is what's mostly left at some of the higher elevations, and then the subboreal spruce hasn't been sampled at all. Next slide. The boreal and taiga plains, we have fairly good distribution. We just need more points throughout different disturbance types, but there's a lower diversity of BEC zones. Go to the next one. So we need to do a few more sampling to get to some of the harder to reach BEC zones, but about 50 more points to finish those. Next slide. So one tool that we developed as part of the Wetlands Workforce is what we're calling the Wetland Ecosystem Services Protocol report card. So after you complete the field assessment and the corresponding GIS questions in a calibrated region, your wetland can be compared to what the potential functioning of wetlands in that region are. So once you completed your field and office questions, it goes into the calculator that can put out this output for how well your ecosystem is functioning and what benefits it's providing to society relative to the rest of the region. So this wetland was like high ranking in the top left for water storage, lower ranking for stream flow and temperature support, high ranking for sediment and retention. And then this can be compared between different wetlands. So if you wanted to compare which wetland to conserve, you could look at the different functions and benefits of interest in the report card as a tool that someone can use without a deeper dive into the calculations that are used for calculating each function. There's potential for like incorporation with WESP into like legislation, more best management practices, or potentially economic evaluation, such as like how carbon offsetting has begun developing with other ecosystem services evaluations. One thing we heard through working with all of the work pods this year was how difficult some of the field parameters were to assess. So with the help of some really talented illustrators, Charisma Thomas and Shanoa, we developed illustrations and interpretation aids for a lot of the field questions. So in the top right, that Excel table is what our assessment form looked like for the field season. All of our field technicians that worked on it will see flashbacks to how many pages of this we had to go through. And then this winter, one of our projects was to develop this more usable field form to go through all the different parameters. So some of the questions are like the woody diameter to capture what the forest is composed of, how many flowering and berry producing shrubs, etc. Do I have one more, Cindy? The full WESP report is available on our website now. So if you're interested in reading more about the functions and benefits that WESP captures, as well as some site profiles that explain more in depth how these are calculated and what they look like on the landscape, you can check that out. I think Cindy put it in the chat. Otherwise, I'll pass it back to Neil.
Thanks, Kyla. So I just sort of want to reflect, we're coming close to the end of our presentation. There were a lot of challenges this past year. They have been mentioned from some of my colleagues, several factors that impeded our work that are worth noting, and which made for a challenging year for our team and the project. In a short time frame, we had to launch a project from hiring, information gathering, doing contracts, getting people into the field, and this was hampered by that time, and even just relationship building with First Nations. It was challenging to do it in a really short time frame for new nations. Of course, we were still dealing with the pandemic. Vaccines were just rolling out at the start of the year. There was uncertainty about what restrictions would look like. There were regional travel restrictions at the start of the year. We dealt with also really extreme weather events, having the hottest year on record in our province, fire and smoke impeding field days, flooding events in the fall, damaging highways and delaying projects. And then, of course, the recovery at the residential schools across BC at the start of the year. And this really took a toll on everyone in terms of needing time to process this and to heal. And of course, realize the long path forward in terms of reconciliation that's required. And the desire of our crews to be sensitive to these events and the impacts and burden it was having on the communities they were working with. So there was a lot to deal with this past year in terms of rolling out this project. And I just wanted to mention that, you know, in a year of economic uncertainty, social anxiety, natural disasters, unimaginable atrocities from our colonial past, our project shone with a glimmer of light, a path forward, a solution to healing the land and communities, and finding opportunities in the face of the pandemic, providing meaningful work, and a path forward to strengthening relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities to rebuild and to collaborate. So I'd like to say that I'm so grateful for the opportunity to coordinate this project. And we're happy to hear that the province has just committed, as of last month, $30 million into the next year to respond to climate disaster and risk by investing in watersheds. And everyone's encouraged to provide feedback on a new BC watershed security strategy and fund. That feedback is required by March 18th. If you're interested in sharing about what that should shape out to be, there's a public consultation phase right now. And for resources related to helping you prepare a submission, there's a couple links here to both POLIS and the Watershed Security Coalition.
And a big part of this project was really getting out into the field and showcasing the stories from the crews that were doing the work. So the communications team, we went out, we collected stories, we interviewed the crews, elders, and really tried to show that through videos and blogs throughout the year. So we have some wetland dialogues that are available with some of our crew members on our website, as well as on the BCWF Wet YouTube channel. And this is just a compilation of some of the voices that we captured.
I think the most unique thing about the Wetlands Workforce Project is how widespread it is across the province, and then how it's also involving such a diversity of people working in these wetlands. So both groups of people who have a lot of experience in wetlands, and then also those who haven't come into these systems before. So it's a really neat project in that it's like exposing a lot of people to this new type of system that they haven't seen, and really spreading that knowledge throughout our society.
I'm learning so much from the training courses that we have, but also from the people that I'm working with, not only within the wetlands workforce, but also the landowners and land managers that we get to meet. They all have such a wealth of knowledge, and they're all so passionate about the wetlands and really excited about us coming out. So it's just been an overall really positive experience.
Oh, and then you do each end.
Monitoring and maintenance is really challenging to find funding for, but we know it's really critical in many ways in improving the way that we do restoration, as well as improving the way that we can protect and conserve wetlands. So this stimulus fund has allowed us to get boots on the ground, people outdoors, both from a hiring and capacity building perspective, and allowed us to work with a number of Indigenous communities as well. So the funding has enabled us to do a lot of work we couldn't do otherwise.
Having folks out here with the wetland workforce, working with us as we restore wetlands one-on-one, they are learning by doing. It's experiential learning, it's hands-on learning. They're learning that cattails are edible. They're learning that you can use a laser level to check elevations of water in a restored wetland before it fills with water. They're learning that you can use heavy equipment to help the environment. And we're showing them the value of wetlands and how important they are to watersheds, how they are important to our rivers and our streams, and how they recharge groundwater.
When I'm learning from school, I get to actually put into work and use what I learn, and that's always a really rewarding experience. So, especially with COVID this past year, we've been working from home, so I'm really happy to kind of get my hands dirty and get in the field.
Like, one of the biggest things that's been super awesome about this experience is being able to work so closely with First Nations from the local communities in the areas that we're working, because they're able to bring a whole set of knowledge that we don't have from those areas. And it's also been just a really great experience to work together, and all of us having the same goal of trying to protect and keep these ecosystems healthy. And that has been really amazing to see in action, and hopefully more places can do this work.
Yeah, this one, I think the common name is just, it's in the leafy moss category. There's
Everyone just, by the end of this project, has a little greater appreciation for what wetlands do for humanity. I think that could have even bigger effects going forward in like more diverse fields, because we've had really diverse work pods, and they might not all continue working in wetlands or continue doing wetland monitoring for the rest of their career, but as they kind of spread out, if they all hold a little more appreciation for wetlands, it's going to increase the knowledge and understanding and significance of wetlands in our province.
So as you can see, there's a lot of work that the team has touched on, that the wetlands workforce and our partners and communities have accomplished over the years. So I encourage you to visit our website, wetlandsworkforce.ca. Our final report is there, which has in more detail some of the accomplishments of our partners and the crews. Also included in that final report are the beautiful illustrations that Shanoa has created with the elder voices. These illustrations we have provided to the elders we interviewed for them to use and share in their own communities. We have explored avenues and opportunities for sharing this wider, but we haven't finalized on any details regarding who would hold them for a longer term. And we just wish to be respectful and support knowledge sharing. But once some of those details get a bit more hashed out, we would love to share them more broadly with the world. But for now, definitely look through our final report and you can read them more thoroughly there. We also have a story map online, all of our wetland dialogues. And of course, we encourage you to visit all of our partner organization websites as well. They have beautiful blogs showcasing all the great work that they do. And then also the Healthy Watersheds Initiative website showcases a lot of the different projects, the other 60 projects that they supported over the year. And there's just so many great stories of crews supporting wetlands and watersheds throughout the province. And we want to thank all of you for being here. We want to thank the funders, First Nations, partners, collaborators, staff, and volunteers. And in addition to the Healthy Watersheds Initiative, we'd like to thank the Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation, Fish and Wildlife Compensation Program, Columbia Basin Trust, Wildlife Habitat Canada, and Environment and Climate Change Canada, who all contributed to the Wetlands Workforce Project.
We would like to end the presentation by paying a tribute to Glenn OJ. As Megan has mentioned earlier, Glenn has made a huge impact on all of us. He was a beloved husband, involved father, and a loving grandfather. And he's a role model to many working on the Wetlands Workforce Project. As an elder, he provided a voice and support to many in his community. And as a First Nation liaison, he guided the Wetlands Workforce team on a journey that helped us strive for meaningful relationships and dialogues with Indigenous people and communities. Glenn, we miss you, and your legacy will be carried by all of us. Thank you everyone for listening. We have a couple more minutes here that we can go through some of the questions here. Maybe Alex, have you seen any that pops up?
Yeah, so I think we're going to 12:45, right? So we can open up any questions. I think we've been answering them slowly in the Q&A. There was one question earlier on asking about where Garden Lake was. I think one of our slides was touching on that. Anyone wants to expand on that?
Sure, I can. The Garden Lake is in the Okanagan, just north of Vernon, between Vernon and Salmon Arm.
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, and then there was lots of questions and interest around the storybirds. I know Cheyenne discussed that, but did we want to expand on any of that a bit further? Like what our potential plans are?
I can speak to it a little bit. I know that it's in our final report. Our intent was to provide this as a gift back to the First Nation communities we're collaborating with, first and foremost. So a lot of those comics have gone back to the communities for their use. We have, because it's such an incredible body of work and there is such power behind it, we have talked about the potential of what would it look like if there was a publication, potentially an assemblage of those illustrations. If we were to do that, we'd want to do it respectfully and find the right distributor, as well as how it would roll out, and obviously need permission to check back with the the speakers who shared their knowledge.
I saw a comment earlier about the links. So at the end, once the recording is available, we will be following up with everyone, providing a link to recording, all the links that we provided here in the chat, as well as a copy of the webinar here.
And then, yeah, we have just another chat in the Q&A from Jen Miles. Maybe we can talk, maybe Kyla can address this one. Is how will the West be expanded to other regions? Is it going to be used primarily to support mapping to identify wetlands, or is it being looked at for natural assets management?
Sorry, I can't find that question, but I think the hope is like to continue calibrating West for the regions that are partially calibrated, and then potentially expand so that it could be a provincial-wide tool. But there's future implications, like there's a lot of different areas that West could be used to implement, like legislatively or for best management practices with offsetting. But is there anything else you'd like to add, Neil?
No, you captured it. It's a decision-making tool. It's something we haven't had in our province, but many other states and jurisdictions do, which is why we pushed it forward this year. I think it's a great tool to educate people as in terms of the calibration piece itself. So it's been a really great process working with a number of First Nation communities and the work pods to go out and do the calibration this year. But then ultimately it leads to a better decision-making tool, and how that ties into regulation is a whole other story that we need to work with the province on. And also First Nation communities.
Questions that are upvoted by a lot of people too. Are there plans for Wetlands Workforce 2.0? All this work was so amazing and inspiring. Maybe Neil, you can touch on that a little bit with the plan for this year.
Yeah, so we'd love to keep it going. I think, unfortunately, the funding timing, we do have to close down the project this month for the most part. We will be applying for similar types of work in the future to carry on things, and we are retaining some of the staff that will carry on and do some work through the Wetlands program of BC Wildlife Federation, and we will also continue to collaborate with a lot of our partners who helped out. We've met not just the 7 groups here, but there was over 200, I think, organizations and agencies we worked with this year. We are all together working on this. This is, protecting and conserving wetlands is more than one group can do. And I like to think of it as a vision that we can all work collaboratively and support one another through that. So whatever form that looks like, I think is still to be determined. But yeah, I would love to run this again. It was such a fantastic opportunity. And I just want to, for those partners who were part of it this past year, thank you so much. It wouldn't have been the same without you.
Yeah, this was really just a snapshot of everything we did. I think we're all just struggling to fit it into an hour-and-a-half presentation. So yeah, there's lots more on resources available. Yeah, if there's any other questions though, feel free to put them in the Q&A here while we have a bit more time. You see there's a question from Jessica. Just would like to hear more about some of the challenges, the detailed challenge examples and how they were solved or dealt with. That's a big question.
Yeah, it's a big question. Many challenges. And I think each of them we addressed, depending on what it was. I think we surrounded ourselves with really good people this year. A lot of the team that you see here is a snapshot of a really great team that we worked with. I think the BC Wildlife Federation had about 40 extra staff through the headquarters and then their pods. And we were dealing with things in the field, in the office, every day to try to help support the project and keep it going. Some of the things we never even talked about today was just even the logistics around safety, field safety, and just how important we stress that and the training throughout the start of it. And so there's so many aspects to this project that and just thankfully we had a great team to support it and make sure that it kept going along at a really fast speed for the framework of time. Time was really against us, and but we managed to accomplish quite a bit.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think we're at 12:30 Pacific time. Another question came in from Alfred. Has there been any vision with this group for the consideration of the possible return of the salmon into the Columbia River?
All I can say is that I've heard of this desire for many, many years. There's a lot of groups working in the Columbia trying to bring the salmon back. I would love to see it. I think many of us would love to see it. And it's really linked to both Indigenous culture and food values, as well as I think it's, we lost them back in the 1950s from some dams that were put in, and it would be lovely to see the return of that for sure.
Near the end of it, so I just want to thank once again for every single one of you that joined us today. Yeah, we will be in touch with you with the recording. Hopefully, we can pass it along with impact like this, and this kind of work will continue forward through different forms. Yeah, so thanks again, everyone, and thank you to my colleague here for preparing the auto one for presentation and sharing as much as you can within a short time frame. And it's been great. It's been a great year. So we'll close it at this for now then, and have a great afternoon and great weekend, everyone.